Welcome back to Quiz Maven. How well do you know the chemical formulae? Take this quiz until the end to find out. Before starting, please subscribe to Quiz Maven channel for more exciting quizzes. Let's get started. If your teacher asks you to bring a bottle of H2O to the science lab, what will you bring? Hydrogen peroxide, water, or methane? Water. If your friend says they need some NaCl for their fries, what will you give them? Table salt, baking soda, or vinegar? Table salt. If a chef asks for a pinch of C12H22O11 to sweeten a dessert, what will you hand them? Fructose, glucose, or sucrose? Sucrose, also known as table sugar. If a mechanic asks for some CO2 to inflate a tire, what will you provide? Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or methane? Carbon dioxide. If your mother asks you to pass the CH3COOH for her salad, what will you give her? Water, ethanol, or vinegar? Vinegar. If a cleaner asks for a container of H2O2, what will you hand them? Hydrogen peroxide, water, or oxygen? Hydrogen peroxide. If a firefighter asks you to hand over the NaHCO3 to put out a small fire, what will you give them? Table salt, baking soda, or calcium carbonate? Baking soda. If a chemist needs C2H5OH for an experiment, what substance are they referring to? Methanol, propanol, or ethanol? Ethanol. If a plumber asks for some CH4 to test a gas line, what will you provide? Methane, ethane, or propane? Methane. If your neighbor asks for C6H6 to use as a solvent, what will you give them? Xylene, toluene, or benzene? Benzene. If a farmer asks for some NH3 for their crops, what will you hand them? Ammonia, nitric acid, or sulfuric acid? Ammonia. If your cousin asks for H2SO4 to use in a car battery, what will you give them? Hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, or nitric acid? Sulfuric acid. If a scientist asks for O2 in the lab, what will you hand over? Carbon dioxide, nitrogen, or oxygen? Oxygen. If your cousin asks for some KOH for a soap-making project, what will you provide? Sodium hydroxide, calcium hydroxide, or potassium hydroxide? Potassium hydroxide. If your father asks you to get Na2CO3 for the swimming pool, what will you get? Baking soda, soda ash, or table salt? Soda ash. If a jeweler asks for AgNO3 to test for silver, What will you hand over? Sodium nitrate, silver nitrate, or potassium nitrate? Silver nitrate. If a gardener asks for CaCO3 to adjust the soil pH, what will you give them? Calcium chloride, calcium hydroxide, or calcium carbonate? Calcium carbonate. If an artist needs ZNO for their paint, what are they asking for? Zinc oxide, zinc sulfate, or zinc chloride? Zinc oxide. If a doctor asks for N2O for a patient, what will you provide? Nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, or ammonia? Nitrous oxide. If a chef asks for KNO3 for curing meat, what will you hand them? Sodium nitrate, potassium nitrate, or ammonium nitrate? Potassium nitrate. If your sibling asks for some C3H8 for the barbecue, what will you provide? Propane, butane, or methane? Propane. If a photographer asks for CHCl3 for a developing solution, what will you give them? Chloroform, carbon tetrachloride, or methylene chloride? Chloroform. If a pharmacist asks for some C8H10N4O2 to make coffee, what are they referring to? Theobromine, nicotine, or caffeine? Caffeine. If your friend needs some CaCl2 to melt ice on the driveway, what will you give them? Calcium carbonate, calcium chloride, or calcium hydroxide? Calcium chloride. If an engineer needs SiO2 for construction materials, what substance are they referring to? Sodium oxide, silicon dioxide, or calcium oxide? Silicon dioxide. How many correct answers did you get? Comment down below. Thank you for watching and thank you for your support. Remember, you don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and by falling over.